Hi, I'm Dr. Roseann, and this is It's Gonna Be Okay. Talking about why did my kid do that, right? Promise you, most behaviors kids do, they're just not doing it on purpose. They don't know why they're doing it. There was a chat in our natural parenting solutions group. If you're not in there, drroseann.com/group. And the mom had said, she doesn't even know why she's acting this way. And, that's pretty normal for kids to not understand their own behaviors, especially when we as adults don't. So let's dive into all the things about kids' behaviors, why they do it, and figure out so that we can help you be a better parent because our kids need us more than ever. And I'm going to start off by saying behavior is the language of children, and that's children of all ages. And some kids mature at different rates, and some kids are very mature very young, and some kids take like to their 20s to mature, and there's a lot of reasons why. We'll talk about that. But our their behavior, as annoying, as frightening, as whatever adjective you want to use by it, is an indicator of what's going on in the inside. So sometimes when we're really frustrated by a kid who's maybe quick to get angry or irritated, something that's on the outside that you can see and you can address, right? So the question becomes, how do you address that? So let's talk about it. First, we have to say, when we talk about kids' behavior, we always have to say, is this a behavioral concern? Like this is a serious clinical issue, or is this just something that's normal developmental issue, right? So, starting from young kids, toddlers all the way up, they want to differentiate from us. They want to have autonomy. And so there's just normal points where kids' behaviors, maybe they're trying something new on, there's something different. And it's a behavior where you're like kind of scratching your head. This is all new for them, and it's new for us, especially when it's our first kid, right? That kid that blazes the trail. My sister always would say that, I was the third kid and I had it easy. I kind of did, but I also knew how to work my mom. She didn't. So she didn't speak her language, I tell you that, right? So, and that's, every relationship is a little different. Every kid's temperament is a little different. And, sometimes temperament is why we see certain behaviors, absolutely. So the first thing we actually want to do is for ourselves is we don't want to personalize their behavior. So I know there's times when you're really annoyed. And recently, I had a parent set who just doesn't get their kid and is like, this kid, if this kid isn't as perfectly behaved as the other three kids in their house, something's wrong with this kid. And yeah, the kid definitely had some ADD, and we did neurofeedback and really worked on it, but just not understanding her behavior amongst three other kids that are pretty neurotypical. And, really felt like, why is this kid doing it? And there's some really funny stories that if I said would be too obvious who it was, but basically they were doing some kinds of behaviors that were somewhat compulsive in a way, right? Pretty funny stuff, actually. It's a little girl. And, the parents were like incensed about, something really silly, like they took something and was running around with it, and they really personalized the behavior, right? And just why did that happen? They weren't being a parent detective, which is super important in understanding your child's behavior, right? And again, none of this is easy. Like I have a doctorate in this stuff, and having worked with thousands of kids over the years, it really becomes quite obvious for me as an outsider. And that's why people always, want to work with us. And if you do want to work with us, you can go to drroseann.com/help and take our solution matcher. But you got to put that hat on and take away the upset, take away the fear, take away whatever emotion you're experiencing, and say, why are these behaviors happening? What's going on, right? So often these behaviors are learned, right? So when we think about kids' behaviors, just like anything else, right? You think about healthy habits that they do, they come down and they maybe go to the fridge and, get breakfast going or put plates out, all those things that you've taught them, right? Well, in that same way, Behaviors that don't serve us can get ingrained, and we have to look at it as, is this a learned behavior? Is this a learned response that they don't know how to unlearn? And many parents will say, well, but I've said this. If you have a kid, right, could it be that there's a clinical issue getting away of new learning? And if you have a child who has a clinical issue, yes, they're going to take 3 times minimum as long to learn something. So if you have multiple kids, right, a lot of times, you're like, well, I did this for, Amy 3 times, but her sister, Becky didn't get it. Why? Well, maybe it's that learned response. They need more reinforcement. Maybe there is a clinical issue. Maybe there's not a clinical issue. And we want to make sure that we're providing a lot of reinforcement for somebody to do that, because we are often surprised that a child has grabbed onto a behavior, and kids can do that in so many ways. It could be that they're anxious. It could be that they didn't, they have processing issues that get in the way. It could be that you're using too much negative language at home and you're like, don't do that, don't do that. And they don't know what to do. So they get stuck on that same behavior, right? Learning means you're doing something new, and new makes people uncomfortable. I mean, I can't believe how uncomfortable adults get with new stuff. I'm always doing new things. A big problem with kids' behaviors is mismatched expectations for you and your child. And this happens across the developmental spectrum, from, the parent that thinks a younger child can't, or or should be able to do something, right? Remember when Max was really little, and we were at the park and he fell, and he, like skinned his knee and was bleeding, but just like got up, and I was like, okay, you're right. And he was like, yeah. And his dad was like freaking out on me that he had skinned his knee. And I was like, buddy, like, he's a boy. This happens all the time. I'm not going to overreact to it. And I was actually, all these years later, right, like probably 16, 17 years later, still struck by his overreaction to that, right? Because my child was like, yeah, whatever, got a Band-Aid. And I was like, okay. So that is, but when we talk about expectations for kids, what are we being explicit? Are we saying, hey, this is what's going on? Kids with processing issues a lot of times need things in writing. Here's choice A, here's choice B. I recently was meeting with one of our families, and I was like, I want you to write it out. Instead of saying, I need you to do this, I need you to do that, you can say, sounds like you're choosing option A, right? You didn't want option A, but it sounds like you're choosing option A. And instead of getting in all that micro pieces, right? It was a disagreement of homework, and the child knew that if they don't keep up with their homework, they're going to have to go down into a lower, less advanced class, and they didn't want to, but they don't want to do their homework. So it's just this constant bickering, and you can't do that. So what's the expectation? The expectation of that parent was he should just be able to do it. And these are things that happen every day. This is a great parent. Like, he should be doing it every day, but the child's expectation was something different. And sometimes it's really the reverse, where the parent has mismatched expectations, right? So what are some other reasons where kids struggle at home? Sometimes it's a stressed family ecosystem. Sometimes there's something going on at home that, maybe there, could be big things like financial changes, or, the death of a pet, or a grandparent, or a divorce, or, maybe you're just stressed because you have a job that's stressful. And sometimes those stressors can affect your children. We don't live in a world where we want to protect our child and they never experience stress. But even just talking about it is a huge help for a child. Talking about what it is, how you manage it, can be incredibly impactful, not just in that moment, but for what your child does in their future, right? Because remember, we're really creating generational mental health. And we want our kids to learn from us. And even when we are imperfect, like you yell at your kid, or you do any of those kinds of things, you got to apologize. You got to talk to your kids, right? We don't talk enough about feelings, and we have to think about all the pieces. As a parent detective, you got to think about all the pieces that are contributing to that behavior, right? And instead of getting overwhelmed, as I always say, be empowered by the options, right? Because a lot of times parents were like, oh my gosh, I had this family that flew in out to me yesterday. They're fantastic, love them. And they were like, we knew when we came in here, Dr. Rowe was going to make us do a dietary change. And I was so glad. And I was like, you're not freaked out by it, right? And they're like, no, we're ready for it. I'm like, okay. I'm like, you're going to get all the benefits. The whole ecosystem's getting the diet change, right? Okay, avoidant behavior. Sometimes kids' behaviors are really about avoiding something. Sometimes it's avoiding something they don't want to do, like they just don't want to do it. It could be they don't want to transition out of something. It could be that what you're asking them to do makes them feel uncomfortable in some way, and they just don't have stress tolerance. And a lot of our behaviors are avoidant, kids and adults, right? So when you're examining it, right, think about it, right? Don't just think, well, you can't avoid that forever, right? What you want to say is, oh, I see this is hard for you. Do you have any, I wouldn't say, do you have any idea? Like, what do you think is the thing that's hard for you? Or how do you feel when it's hard for you? Try to get them to connect. And this is all going to be new learning. If you're not talking like this, they're not going to have the answers, right? So we always want to cue our kids, make sure they help them understand. Okay. One of the biggest reasons I see the kids I work with, the neurodivergent kids, the kids with PANS and PANDAS, the kids with, anxiety, whatever's going on with them, sensory issues get in the way of their behavior. And I want to say that it's a simple fix, but it's not. It's a lifetime, it's a lifetime of changing your lifestyle, right? And when we think about sensory issues, input from their environment causes their nervous system to stress. It might mean that they might be more startled, they might be angry, they might be more irritated. So there are sensory techniques that can help to regulate your nervous system. So, everything from sensory exercises like brain gym type exercises, swimming, karate, those are really top sensory activities, but it be doing things at home like trampolining or a weighted blanket. There's ways to help your nervous system regulate. I can tell you, like, my older son likes to jump, and that sort of just helps him to kind of regulate. And might be a bath, but you want to think about what it is. So we have somebody who says, their son has avoidant behavior only towards me, and she's puzzled, right? That's a great, great question, because I can't even tell you how many times that a child only shows certain behaviors in places or towards people, and how confusing that could be, that your child feels like your child's doing that on purpose. And really it's because that's the safest place or the safest person. And also sometimes you have more conflict, right? Like if you're not able to, if you're somebody who's easily irritated, and you're getting into a lot of conflict with your kid, you just may have conflict all the time, right? If you're not trying to self-regulate, you're not trying to use emotional language. It could be that, one, they feel safe for you. Two, you have different kinds of personality, right? Somebody says they love the weighted blanket. I know I love the weighted blanket. It's great. And just to know, sensory activities, whether it's weighted blankets or rolling on the ground, there's so many awesome sensory activities. They tend to last about 20 minutes. So that's your optimal time. I know a lot of people do it like sensory activities before, like academics or dinner or certain things. You can switch and do another, but they tend to have its optimal time is about 20 minutes on the nervous system. So, they don't last forever, but the more you do it, the more the nervous system gets into a regulated state, right? So self-regulation isn't like, wow, I achieved the self-regulation, I never have to do anything again. It's an ongoing process. So make sure that you're using the tools, right? Hunger or fatigue. I find that some kids are just lousy sleepers. Some kids are restrictive eaters. And these two things tend to be some of the biggest reasons why kids have behaviors. I cannot even tell you how many kids I know that eat nothing but chicken nuggets and, French fries or chicken nuggets and mac and cheese and things. You just can't get nutrients from that, people. You can't. You need a variety of foods, never making you feel guilty. but what else are you going to do to put in your body, right? What can you do to help regulate? There are other things. Of course, I'm going to recommend our multi-mag brain formula. You can go to drroseann.com/magnesium. Magnesium is the most used nutrient in the body. That coupled with vitamin D is just really pretty essential for everybody on the planet. And our multi-mag brain formula really was designed for the brain to calm and regulate it. But it's something that, again, we can't sort of get enough of magnesium. We need a lot of it, but you need nutrients, you need protein, you need fat. The brain needs fat to calm and regulate itself, and a lot of kids aren't getting enough. So what do we do with our kids that are, maybe they're irritated or they're forgetful or, they're all of those things at once, right? And that happens a lot. So number one, if you have a kid who's agitated, when a kid is activated, no learning can occur. So we have to calm that brain, right? That's why I'm Calm Brain Happy Family. You got to focus on stress tolerance and coping skills. And it's just a different way. It's shifting your parenting. Maybe you're yelling a lot. Maybe you're doing over reminding. And it's changing from that to focusing on, wow, you did such a great job on that today. What do you think was different? Really getting them to point out and think about it, to make their own connections. And stress tolerance, right? We need our kids to have a band, a continuum, right? We call it a window of tolerance. You need a window of tolerance to manage stress. I think that is, something that all people need. And I think in today's world, we don't have enough of that, right? And when we think about, the skills that really help them, it is those coping skills. Now, obviously, when your child is really unfocused and all of those things, you really need to think about structure and setting up the right structure. I have lots of blogs and different areas that really get you into the specifics. But when we actually think about our kids' behavior, please know it's generally not on purpose. And we can't personalize the behavior. I mean, I don't even care if they tell you they hate your guts. They are being mean, but they don't mean to be. They don't know what else to do. And so when you remove that from that, right, then you don't get so activated and you're able to be that parent detective. I want to give a shout out to somebody who just said they ordered our multi-mag powder last week and they can't wait to try it. So thank you for that. I'm super excited. I had somebody who again came in yesterday and flew in and they were like, we're so excited. You can go to drroseann.com/magnesium. So wherever you are on this parenting journey and you feel that your child really is not learning, they're not understanding what they need to do, you're always welcome to go to drroseann.com/help. It's going to have a solution matcher and you get lots of great tips. And we do a lot of psychoeducation and resources, right? I'm committed to, changing the way we view and think children's mental health, but don't feel alone, and get the help that you need. Nobody ever regrets help. They only regret when they don't. Sending everybody a lot of love.